When God Was a Woman, the landmark exploration of the ancient worship of the great goddess and the eventual suppression of women's rights by Merlin. Introduction, Part 3. In 1961, a series of mistakes was described by Professor Walter Emery, who took part in the excavations of some of the earliest Egyptian tombs. He tells us that the chronological position and status of the Merlin is uncertain, but there is reason to suppose that she might be the successor of Zur and the third sovereign of the first dynasty. Writing of the excavation of this tomb by Sir Finders Petrie in 1900, he says, "At that time it was believed that Merlin was a king, but later research has shown the name to be that of a woman and, to judge by the richness of the burial, a queen." He goes on to say, in 1896, De Morgan, then director of the Service of Antiquities, discovered at Negev a gigantic tomb which, from the objects found in it, was identified as the burial place of Hor-Aha, first king of the first dynasty. However, later research has shown that it is more probable that it was the subculture of Nekhotep, Hor-Aha's mother. And again, he tells us that on the mace of Narmer, a seated figure in a canopied palanquin was once thought to be that of a man, but a comparison of similar figures on a wooden label from Saqqara shows that this is improbable and that it almost certainly represents a woman. Yet, despite his own accounts of this series of assumptions that the richest burials and royal palanquins of the past were for men rather than women, in describing the tomb of King Narmer, he then states, "This monument is almost insignificant in comparison with the tomb of Nekhotep at Negev, and we can only conclude that this was only the king's southern tomb and that his real burial place still awaits discovery." Though some pharaohs did build two tombs, one might expect a possibly or probably rather than such an absolute conclusion and the implied dismissal of the possibility that in that period of early dynastic Egypt, a queen's tomb just might have been larger and more richly decorated than a king's. In Palestine, before the Hebrews, Anati described a group of Asiatics arriving in Egypt. In this description, he explains that it is the men who have arrived, and with them they bring their goods and their donkeys, their wives and children, tools, weapons, and musical instruments in that order. Anati's description of the earliest appearance of the goddess is no less male-oriented. He writes, "These Upper Paleolithic men also created a feminine figure apparently representing a goddess or being of fertility. The psychological implications of the mother goddess are therefore of tremendous importance. Here undeniably is the picture of a thinking man, of a man with intellectual as well as material achievements. Could it possibly have been the female ancestors of those women who are listed, along with the donkeys and other goods, who were thinking women with intellectual as well as material achievements?" Dr. Margaret Murray of the University of London, writing on ancient Egypt in 1949, suggested that the whole series of events surrounding the romantic relationships of Cleopatra, who actually held the legitimate right to the Egyptian throne, was misunderstood as the result of male bias. She points out that the classical historians, imbued as they were with the customs of patrilineal descent and monogamy, besides looking on women as the chattels of their menfolk, completely misunderstood the situation and have misinterpreted it to the world. These are just a few examples of the sexual and religious biases that I encountered. As Cyrus Gordon, professor of Near Eastern Studies and formerly chairman of the Department of Bernardus University in Massachusetts, writes, "We absorb attitudes as well as subject matter in the learning process. Moreover, the attitudes tend to determine what we see and what we fail to see in the subject matter. This is why attitude is just as important as subject matter in the educational process. Many questions come to mind. How influenced by contemporary religions were many of the scholars who wrote the texts available today? How many scholars have simply assumed that males have always played the dominant role in leadership and creative invention and projected this assumption into their analysis of ancient cultures? Why do so many people educated in this century think of classical Greece as the first major culture, when written language was in use in great cities built at least 25 centuries before that time? And perhaps most important, why is it continually inferred that the age of the pagan religions, the time of the worship of female deities, if mentioned at all, was dark and chaotic, mysterious and evil, without the light of order and reason, that supposedly accompanied the latter male religions, when it has been archaeologically confirmed that the earliest law, government, medicine, agriculture, architecture, metallurgy, wheeled vehicles, ceramics, textiles, and written language were initially developed in societies that worship the goddess. We may find ourselves wondering about the reasons for the lack of easily available information on societies who, for thousands of years, worshiped the ancient creatress of the universe. Despite the many obstacles, I sought out and gathered the existing information and began to collate and correlate what I had collected. As I undertook this process, the importance, the longevity, and the complexity of this past religion began to take form before me. So often there was just the mention of the goddess, a part of a legend, an obscure reference tucked away in some 400 or 500 pages of a scholarly erudition. A deserted temple site on Crete or a statue in the Museum of Istanbul with little or no accompanying information begin to find its place in the overall picture. Painstakingly bringing these together, I finally began to comprehend the total reality. It was more than an inscription of an ancient prayer, more than an art relic sitting on a museum shelf behind glass, more than a grassy field strewn with parts of broken columns or the foundation stones which had once supported an ancient temple. Placed side by side, the pieces of this jigsaw puzzle revealed the overall structure of a geographically vast and major religion, one that had affected the lives of multitudes of people over thousands of years. Just like the religions of today, it was totally integrated into the patterns and laws of society, the morals and attitudes associated with those theological beliefs, probably reaching deep into even the most agnostic and atheistic of minds. I am not suggesting a return or revival of the ancient female religion, as Sheila Collins writes, as women, our hope for fulfillment lies in the present and future and not in some mythical golden past. I do hold the hope, however, that contemporary consciousness of the once widespread veneration of the female deity as the wise creatress of the universe and all life and civilization may be used to cut through the many oppressive and falsely founded patriarchal images, stereotypes, customs, and laws that were developed as direct reactions to goddess worship by the leaders of the latter male-worshipping religions. For as I shall explain, It was the ideological inventions of the advocates of the later male deities imposed upon that ancient worship with the intention of destroying it and its customs that are still, through their subsequent absorption into education, law, literature, economics, philosophy, psychology, media, and general social attitudes, imposed upon even the most non-religious people of today. This is part 3 of When God Was a Woman, the landmark exploration of the ancient worship of the great goddess and the eventual suppression of women's rights by Merlin Stone. I encourage you to please purchase the book. We are at Introduction Part 3. And thank you for watching. And please feel free to follow Oracle Candles on Instagram and TikTok for more content like this.